If you're visiting, or maybe you haven't been in a few weeks and you're looking up and going, what in the world is the ceiling? Are the ceiling tiles falling out of the sky? They're not. We actually have been in a sermon series called Connecting the Content of Our Lives. And we started with many more things hanging up there, many more signs. And each week we've been taking these different parts of who we are, ingredients within our lives, and talking about ways to connect them to our relationship with God. And as you see, as we've dealt with them, each week we hang another one on the cross as representing, connecting that content of our life to God. It could be worry, anger, pain and hurt, illness. Today we'll launch in a new area. Do you have any really peculiar friends or acquaintances? You're laughing. Because some of you aren't laughing. I mean, if you're thinking about it and you go, well, I've thought about it, and the answer is no, I have bad news for you. It might be you. You might be the one. I think that it was true for me. I think that's how many of my friends viewed me. I was their weird religious friend. And I think probably all of us have some of these very strange relationships with folks. Within my circle of friends, and it includes my family relations, there are some folks that might just scare you a bit. I hate to tell you, I grew up in the 60s. You know what that means? Some of my friends have been in jail. Not just for little things, big things. Some were just downright criminal types. And unfortunately, the very sad truth is some of them are dead. They're no longer here. But surprisingly, here's the amazing thing. Some of them now live active Christian lives. Amazing. They've connected what once was a content that wasn't too good. They've connected that up to God, and it's changed their lives. You never know, do you? You never know when you're looking back at folks. How much of us, you and I, do we really let people see? You know, being a Christian at church is it's kind of easy, isn't it? It doesn't really require much from us. There's no real cost for us kind of being religious folk in this context. But there may be other people outside of this context in your family, your friends. Maybe you wouldn't reveal quite. It might be a little embarrassing. You might even be a little scared to share all of your faith with them. Because maybe your religious content, religious content of your life, would be a little awkward, might be a little out of place. Now, we may have family, friends, workplace colleagues who never really know much about our personal faith in Jesus Christ. Sure, they might know that we're religious. We might even give us the title Christian. They know we probably go to some church somewhere. But that may be as far as our firewall of faith will allow us to present out to them. And I don't think it's just that we're private about our religious faith. I think sometimes that is the case. But I think more often than not, we're like the cowardly lion in The Wizard of Oz. Remember the cowardly lion when they're walking down the yellow brick road and they come up to the haunted forest. And there's a sign outside of the haunted forest. And you know what it says? I'd turn back if I were you. And remember that cowardly lion? He reads that, and he immediately turns around and he retreats. He heads back. He doesn't want to go. I think for us, sometimes we practice a form of inconspicuous Christianity. And here's what I mean by that. When it comes to our relationship with God, we've read that warning sign. It may not be the yellow brick road, but we've read it. Don't bring faith into your family or your friends. And heaven forbid you'd bring it into your workplace. Don't dare go in. The sign says, it's too dangerous. I'd turn back if I were you, right? And I think we do that. I think everybody does that a little bit. So if this is true, and I think for most of us we might admit in some cases it is, how can we be this person of faith? How can we be a Christian leading a life of true and effectual discipleship? My daughter said, what does effectual mean? My daughter, who knows 10 million words, did not know what effectual. It means you make a difference. It has an effect on people, effectual. How can we live a life of true effectual discipleship in our families? Think about that. Even Jesus had trouble, didn't he? In his own hometown. And as you know, never talk what? Religion and politics where? In the family. It's politically incorrect, isn't it? And it could actually get you kicked out of the next family dinner, right? We're not bringing that fella back again. Look at the problems he caused. And how can we lead a life of true and effectual discipleship amongst our friends? You know, no religious talk. Don't do that. That's kind of politically incorrect. It might get you kicked out of the friends club. Not going to invite you out anymore. And how can we be a Christian disciple in our workplaces? Think about that. That's completely and totally politically what? Incorrect. And it'll probably get you what? Fired. In some cases, you could be fired over that kind of stuff. And here's the last one. Sometimes it's even in church, you know. Sometimes, people say, you're clapping the hands too much. You're clapping hands too much. You're getting a little too crazy at that first service. And you might need to tone that down. You're a little bit too conspicuous in that kind of religious display. I know some congregations that if you did that, you might get excommunicated. I'm glad it's not here. So here we go. Friends, family, and workplace colleagues. I think these are the most difficult. Of all these things we've hung up representing the contents of our lives, I think these may be the most difficult to connect up with God. So how do you do it? How do we bring that part of our lives connected up to our life in Christ? I think we have great models to help us in this. The life of the Apostle Paul, he gives us a great model. And I like him because he's more relatable. I think in many ways, he's like us. Can you imagine being with the Apostle Paul, sitting with his Jewish family for Passover, that first time after he had that conversion experience to Christianity? Can you imagine that? Whoa, a little awkward. What's he going to say? It's Jewish Passover. Is he going to talk about this Christian stuff? And what about all those Greek heathen friends he had and that he hung out with? How did he connect that content? And he did. That's what I want to look at today. So first, it's, I think, kind of the guiding principle for Paul is he was anything but an inconspicuous Christian. I think he was very conspicuous. And here's what he says to us. Here's the guideline. Need glasses for this. This may appear on the screen. This is 1 Corinthians 2, 1 through 5, and I hope these are the same translations, but they may not be. When I came to you, brethren, and I didn't come with superiority of speech or wisdom, proclaiming to you the testimony of God, for I determined to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling, and my message and my preaching were not in persuasive words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit of power. Wasn't just about him getting up and giving great sermons. Paul said this, we're supposed to demonstrate the Spirit of power of our faith. I think if someone saw Paul in that beginning part of the growth of the church, if they saw Paul, they had an opportunity to know Jesus. He said, I just want to know one thing among you, Jesus Christ and him crucified. If you saw Paul, I think you had an opportunity to actually know Jesus. He's saying, in essence, who you are is most evident in what you do. It's those actions and what comes out of your mouth and what you say. He's not talking about a sermon. He's talking about how we speak to folks. He said it's not about being, I think, Billy Graham. I don't have these incredible ability to preach to thousands, Paul said. It's not about being Joel Osteen on TV to millions of people. He said it's about being a light in the dark. So I want to look at one other verse here too that's Paul writing to the church in Philippi. It's just real quick. It's chapter 2, verse 15. He's saying, go out into the world uncorrupted. And this may be a different translation too. Let me read the one you have. Do all things without murmuring and arguing, so that you may be blameless and innocent children of God, without blemish in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation. In other words, things are pretty tough out there, and I want you to go out and do something different. He says, carry the light-giving message into the night. The Phillips translation I really like of this verse. It says this. It says, be shining like lights in a dark place. That's a great image. So how do we do that? It's not about being Billy Graham. We just have to be a little bit of a light in a dark place. Well, the first thing is to be a catalytic question. What does that mean? I love this, a catalytic question. You know, a catalyst is something that stimulates, causes something to happen. So we want you to be a question-causing type of person, living in such a way that people get really curious. Because when people get curious, it gets the best of them. And when the curiosity gets the best of them, what do? They ask questions, don't they? Why are you the way you are? Hopefully they're doing it for a good reason and not a bad one. Some of my more, I guess I term them hoodlum-esque type friends, they're Christians. These folks that were really kind of dangerous people back in the day. How did that happen to them? How did they move? What transpired in their life? What are the elements that took place that changed the course where they were headed, and they weren't headed in good places? I remember I have a sordid past, as you know. I told you I grew up in the 60s, but some of my friends, they got heavily into dealing drugs, and some in my neighborhood. And so we would go to a friend's house, and I remember very well walking into a friend's house and literally seeing one of these, you know, these big garbage bags that we use in the fellowship hall to take garbage out, completely full of marijuana, completely full. I mean, thousands of dollars worth of stuff right there. And I walk into that. And I remember going into another friend's house, a guy, one of my really good friends through the years. I walked into his house, and he had a bag of about $1,000 worth of cocaine. He was dealing cocaine. He was using it too, but he was dealing with it. So I have these friends, and they're all into these very bad things. Do you know, in both those situations, they never offered me any of those. Why do you suppose that was? They offered it to others of their friends. Why didn't they do that for me? The answer's pretty simple. Maybe you're ahead of me. They knew about my faith in God. They especially knew about my relationship with Jesus Christ. How? I didn't go around telling them. I never preached them sermons. How did they know? They knew because I became a conspicuous non-consumer of the darkness. I was a conspicuous non-consumer. They couldn't get it. Man, growing up in the 60s, early 70s, you know, everybody's experimenting in all this stuff, and they could not understand why, when there's thousands of dollars worth of free drugs to be had, I would not take any of them. You know, it's always been a bit surprising. It is, and it's been quite humbling for me. When they would tell me, some of these folks that went on to become Christians, and they would say, you know, Joe, you had a lot to do with that. And I'm like, what are you talking? I never talked to you about Jesus. I knew what you were into. I was just being your friend. That was it. And they said, no, you played a role in that. And I guess it's that kind of conspicuous faith that lives out of us without ever having to preach a word. It's the way we live, isn't it? That's what it boils. It's the way we live. It's how we make decisions in life based on our faith. And it's our non-judgmental availability to our friends that makes a big difference. Paul would say, I guess, in my own little way, I was sort of that little bit of light that was shining in a couple of dark places among my friends. And it caused them to have the catalytic question, why? Still, I think the hardest of all, sometimes it can be family, right? Because our family, prophets never appreciated in their own hometown. I mean, Jesus proved that out. So look at Philippians 1:27 real quick, if it pops on the screen. It basically says this in a nutshell. I'm going to paraphrase. Whatever happens in your life, whatever happens to you in life, conduct yourself in a manner worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. In other words, in all things, as we're doing, as we're living, as we're being among our family and friends, live it out, demonstrate as best you're able. Nobody's perfect, but demonstrate the actual character of Jesus. Even, here's the key. People, I know you're going right now, I can't be Jesus. I don't want you to be Jesus. Listen to this. Even if it's only moments of authenticity over time. You don't have to do it all the time. Moments of authenticity over time. I used to have two brother-in-laws. I still do. One's now divorced, and there's a new one in there, so it's kind of been sort of a revolving door. But at one point back in the 70s, I had a particular two brother-in-laws, and they called me and said, "We're going to take you for a little ride." I'm like, "What?" Little ride? And I knew they weren't quite, I didn't think they didn't like me, but I knew I wasn't their best friend anyway. But they pull up at my girlfriend's house, and they go, "Get in the car." And I felt like those mob movies. Get in the car. We're going for a ride. And I'm like, uh-oh, I'm going for the ride. This is it. I'm going for the ride. And I did. I got a bit nervous, and I got in the car. And as we started talking, I figured what they were about. I thought for a moment they were going to beat me up, but they were trying to confront me because they felt like somehow, I guess, my I call it the Woodstock hippie appearance. Back in those days, I had long blonde hair, surfing and doing all that stuff. I had drug dealing friends, all of those things. I guess they put that all together, and they thought, we're going to straighten this guy right out. And it was scary, but it was funny because I knew who I was, and I knew who I was in my faith. They didn't know. They'd formed an opinion based on a short-term surface evaluation. Sometimes, although our faith in Jesus Christ is completely and concretely connected to God, it's very evident. People see it in us. They connect up who we are, what we're about, to God. But even our family members don't see it. And I think for them, they're some of the last to see it. They don't see it at first. It takes a healthy track record over time. Could be days, could be months, could be years of exhibiting the content of your life as being connected to God. Parents and your most intimate, close family, you got brothers and sisters, those kinds of folks, they can spot spiritual pride a mile away. And you know what they see it as? Hypocrisy. It's interesting. Charles Stanley says this: the power of consistent Christian living in the context of family relations is the primary classroom for authentic Christianity. Wow. We have quite a responsibility there. My father, for the longest time, I think it was like my brothers-in-law, that he didn't understand what I was about. He didn't get it. He didn't get the long hair either. He was in the military. He gave me a crew cut for the first 10 years of my life until I said no. So he didn't understand. And at home, we didn't typically talk about religion a lot. My dad talked about politics a lot and about communism. He was in the war, all those things. But we didn't talk much about a faith in Jesus Christ, especially not a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I think for my dad and my mom, their faith was real, but they just expressed it in different ways than I did. But I think he wondered after a while what I was about. I was doing a lot of side jobs so that I could be in ministry. I didn't care a lot about making any money. And I think he thought, will he ever get a real job? I'm starting to have those things. Funny how history repeats itself. I have some children, But anyway, It's bad when you see exactly yourself and your kids. It's bad. It's quite convicting. Anyway, but over time, my dad watched me, okay? It wasn't every moment, but he watched me grow. He watched what my life was about. He watched how Elise and I parented our kids. And I think that picture over time made a huge difference. And I even found later in his life, he became more verbal about a relationship with Jesus. It was amazing. It was an amazing thing to watch. So what about your coworkers? Okay, we've talked about friends and family. Now coworkers. Well, here's the message. Know that the camera is always on. The camera's always on. Look at Philippians 1, 12 through 14. I want to read this to you, and I'm going to read out of mine, rather it might not agree with that translation there. Paul's trying to advance the gospel through what happens to him. In other words, what happens to him, he doesn't say how bad it is. Oh, look at me. I'm spearheading the Christian church and bad stuff's happening to me. He goes, wow, look what I can do with what happens to me. He says this. I want you to know, beloved, that what has happened to me has actually helped to spread the gospel. Some bad stuff happens. He goes, hey, this is really helping. So that it's become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to everyone else that my imprisonment is for Christ. In other words, wow, bad stuff happened to me. Look at this. It's spreading everywhere. People see. The camera's on. He says, most of my brothers and sisters have been made confident in the Lord by my imprisonment. Dare to speak with greater boldness. Isn't that amazing? People can be encouraged by how you and I handle life. I remember, I guess it was about 3 years ago. Could be, about 3 years ago. I was standing at the door greeting like we're going to do in just a bit. Sitting there at the door, and I'm shaking hands. And there's a fellow that had been visiting pretty much on a regular basis, not a member, but I certainly knew who he was. And, he came up, and he shook my hand. And he said something very curious to me. He said, I've been watching you. I hate it when people say that to me. Because I'm thinking, what did I do now? Did he see me on I-4? Was I speeding? Did he see me at the Willow Tree drinking a beer at Hollerbox? What is it now that I've done that the camera's always on and he saw me? What he meant by I've been watching you it was just those first few months after Rachel's accident. And he wanted to see how a person of faith handles some very extreme adversity. He wanted to see if what I do, sitting up here on a Sunday morning, pontificating out to all of you, he wanted to see if it was the same when bad things happened to our family. And when he said, I've been watching you, he was encouraged. He was encouraged by how we dealt with adversity, how we connected that content to God, and it made a difference. So can you be a Christian amongst family, friends, and co-workers? I hope you'll find today the answer is what? Yes, you can do that. Because anybody can purport a faith, right? But those that do that with authenticity amongst the three, family, friends, co-workers, are connecting that part of the content of their life to God. And I have a way to demonstrate that today. Each week as we do this, we talk about these ingredients of our lives, of the content. We demonstrate ways to connect. So let that sign hanging there, which is going to spin just right for me, let that sign demonstrate that. Friends, we can connect. We can do that. And people will know. People will know you're a Christian. It's amazing without you ever telling them so. It shows they can feel it. You don't have to preach on the corner. You just have to live a little bit like Paul. Be a conspicuous Christian who's excited and causes the catalytic question, why are they the way they are? And knows that the camera's always on so we can offer a healthy track record to people of what our faith means in our life. And the most incredible thing is, if you can do this, if you're able to do this in your life, it's the most amazing thing to have somebody walk up to you and say, you know, it's because of you that I found Jesus Christ.